You once believed that destiny could be mapped out with hard work and a good education. It isn't until this very moment that you realize a terrifying truth. In the face of absolute power, your personal desires mean absolutely nothing. This is the story of how you are forced into the abyss, and how you ultimately decide to become the abyss itself. This isn't some grand romantic epic. It's a multi-year, blood-soaked gamble of survival, betrayal, and razor-sharp calculation. You're 17 years old. Right now, you're sitting in the dead-silent library at the University of Pisa. Summer sunlight filters through stained glass, washing over the yellowed parchment in front of you. You're entirely focused on translating a dry, tedious section of the Justinian Code regarding property inheritance. Your life plan is perfectly clear and peacefully boring. Finish your law degree, return home, and become a respectable, drama-free scholar. Maybe eventually a bishop in some quiet, nowhere town. You have zero interest in politics, and you absolutely despise swords. Suddenly, your private servant, covered in mud and gasping for air, violently breaks through the guards and collapses to his knees right at your desk. He doesn't even catch his breath before dropping a sentence that shatters your ordinary life into a million pieces. My lord, your father, Rodrigo, just bought the papacy. In that single second, your quill freezes in mid-air. A drop of ink falls onto the parchment, bleeding into a black hole that can never be erased. You don't feel ecstasy. You feel a bone-chilling terror. Your father is now Pope Alexander VI. You see, back then, the Vatican wasn't just a pure sanctuary of faith. If we look at it through a modern lens, the Vatican was the largest, wealthiest, and most lethal multinational monopoly in Europe. And the Pope, he was the CEO. You're not a student anymore. You immediately realize you are now the son of the CEO of Europe's biggest syndicate. This doesn't mean glory. It means you just became a walking target. You are escorted back to Rome overnight. Weeks later, you are forced into the heavy, crimson robes of a cardinal. It's spun from expensive silk and gold thread, but to you, it feels like a glamorous straitjacket. You are dragged into the absolute core of Vatican power. Your father hands you your first assignment, managing the church's finances and its sprawling intelligence network. Your annual income, 35,000 ducats. That's enough gold to arm a private military. But you have no friends here. You are surrounded by a board of directors, rival cardinals, who are watching you like vultures. Their loyalty can be bought, but it can easily be outbid. You face your first massive moral dilemma and survival choice. You could say no. You could cling to your academic dreams. But if your family loses power, your political rivals will wipe you and your siblings off the face of the earth. You have no choice. You force yourself to swallow your disgust and start learning how to read people in this high-stakes world of lies, hypocrisy, and deadly poisons. But you quickly learn that your political rivals aren't your biggest threat. The real existential risk comes from your own flesh and blood. In the distribution of your family's power, your position is incredibly awkward. Your older brother Juan got exactly what you desperately wanted: secular power. He is appointed Captain General of the Papal Army. He wears shining armor, controls the family's military might, and bathes in the flattery of nobles and the adoration of women. And you? You're stuck in a red robe, working in a dimly lit office, managing tedious church documents, raising funds to feed Juan's army, and forcing fake smiles at diplomatic banquets with rivals you'd rather strangle. Think of it like a highly dysfunctional modern family business. You are the stressed out CFO, desperately plugging financial holes, while your brother is the arrogant, incompetent trust fund CEO who takes all the credit. Every time Juan leads the army into battle, you lose sleep behind the Vatican walls. Your stress doesn't come from religious duties. It comes from precise risk calculation. Juan is a military idiot. Not only does he lose battles constantly, but he also makes enemies everywhere, starting street brawls over women. Every time he loses, your family's prestige tanks and the assassins of rival families step 1 inch closer to your bedrooms. You've run the numbers 1,000 times. As long as Juan controls the military, he will eventually get the Borgia family killed. What do? Warn your father. Your father is blindly obsessed with Juan. He won't listen. You are drowning in psychological anxiety. You control Rome's intelligence network. You can see every assassination plot forming against your family, while your head of security, brother, is drinking himself to death in a brothel. Until a cold, dreary morning in 1497, Juan goes missing. Days later, fishermen pull his body from the muddy waters of the Tiber River. He has been stabbed 9 times, his throat slit. Yet, his gold wasn't touched. This was a highly professional political hit. When Juan's corpse is brought back to the Vatican, your father completely breaks down, weeping over the body. But you stand in the shadows, staring at your brother's pale face. You don't shed a single tear. Who killed Juan? All of Rome is guessing, but you couldn't care less about the truth. In fact, you actively destroy the leads your intelligence network brings you, because you see a massive opportunity. A strategic pivot point to reset your family's survival odds. A power vacuum. In your mind, you calculate at lightning speed. Juan is dead. The family army is leaderless. Rivals are about to strike. This is a crisis of apocalyptic proportions, but it's also your one and only ticket out of that red robe. In this exact moment, you make a decision that will alter the course of history. You don't comfort your grieving father. Instead, you march straight into the Pope's private study. You strip off the crimson cardinal robe, the ultimate symbol of divine power, and throw it onto his desk. You look your father in the eye and say, "I am taking over the army." This is a wildly high-risk play. In the history of the Catholic Church, no cardinal had ever voluntarily resigned. This means you are giving up a guaranteed 35,000 ducats a year. You are giving up your eligibility to become the next pope. You are willingly jumping into a meat grinder of blades and blood. But your logic is ice cold. In a chaotic world, holding a law book and a cross won't protect anyone. The only way to survive is to hold a sword. You put on black armor, but that isn't enough. You know your brother's army is a disorganized mess. You need elite allies. You need heavy cavalry. You set your sights on the powerhouse north of the Alps, France. At the time, King Louis XII of France desperately needed one piece of paper. A papal dispensation for divorce, so he could marry the former king's widow and legally annex the Duchy of Brittany. That piece of paper is your leverage. With the Pope's seal in hand, you travel to France yourself. Think of this like a top-tier modern corporate negotiation. You hold the exclusive franchise license the other side is dying to get. You slap that paper down in front of the King of France and state your price. You don't want money. You want the rights to use France's elite military and a secular title, the Duke of Valentinois. The king agrees. With a single document, you buy 10,000 French heavy cavalrymen. When you ride back into Italy atop a warhorse, leading the most destructive military force in Europe, you are no longer the frail student reading in the Pisa library. Your new motto is literally engraved on the blade of your sword. Art Caesar, art nihil. Either Caesar or nothing. You begin an iron-fisted purge of Rome's opposition. The nobles who once mocked your youth and secretly backed your enemies start meeting with inexplicable accidents. The Tiber River suddenly sees a lot of unidentified burlap sacks. You secure short-term, absolute safety through sheer brutality, but you've also stepped onto a blood-soaked path with no return. However, expanding an empire requires multitasking. While men slaughter each other on the front lines, a much more cruel game is being orchestrated by you behind the scenes. To solidify your map of power, brute force isn't enough. You need alliances to divide your enemies, and your beautiful sister, Lucrezia, is the most expensive and tragic political pawn in your hand. In that era, aristocratic marriages were exactly like modern corporate mergers and cross-shareholding. There is no love. There is only risk hedging. Initially, to secure influence in Milan, your family married the 13-year-old Lucrezia to Giovanni Sforza. But a few years later, the political landscape violently shifts. Milan is no longer an ally. They are an obstacle to your expansion. The ROI of this marriage has gone negative. You and your father make a ruthless call. Force an annulment. The excuse? You publicly claim Giovanni is impotent and unable to consummate the marriage. For a medieval nobleman, this is a lethal public humiliation. Giovanni is forced to sign the papers, but he doesn't swallow his pride quietly. It is widely rumoured that after leaving Rome, Giovanni sought revenge by spreading a highly destructive narrative across Europe. He claimed the real reason the Borgias wanted Lucrezia back was that you and your father were engaged in an unspeakable, incestuous relationship with her. People even speculated that the mysterious baby boy who later appeared in your household, known as the Infans Romanus, was the product of this taboo bond. Historians generally agree that this was almost certainly a malicious political smear campaign orchestrated by your enemies. Just like a coordinated PR hit piece in today's corporate world, the goal was to completely annihilate your family's social credit. But the lethal power of rumours is real. Your family's reputation takes a massive hit. To divert attention and rebuild alliances, you immediately marry your sister off to a second husband, Alfonso of Naples. This time, your sister actually falls in love. They have a child. For a brief moment, her life is filled with light, but destiny, or rather your ambition, destroys her once again, because you need the French army to conquer central Italy, the Romagna, and France is the sworn enemy of Naples. As long as Alfonso breathes, the French king won't trust you. Alfonso's existence is now a direct threat to your grand strategy. You face the cruelest moral dilemma of your life. On one side is your sister, who prays for you every night, carrying Alfonso's child. On the other side is your empire. If you lose the French army, your enemies will tear you to pieces. Do you hesitate? Maybe. But in this high-risk world, emotion is a luxury you can't afford. Late one night, Alfonso is ambushed by masked assassins on the steps of St. Peter's Basilica. Stabbed multiple times, he desperately drags himself back to his room. Your sister, is terrified. She guards her husband's bed day and night. She even cooks his broth on a small stove in the room, refusing any food brought by outsiders, guarding against any further assassination attempts. She is defending him against everyone, even you. And she was right to do so. A month later, Lucrezia is tricked into leaving the room for just 30 minutes. In that window, your most trusted executioner, Micheletto, slips inside. There is no clash of swords. Using a simple cord, Micheletto quietly ends Alfonso's life right there on his sickbed. When your sister collapses in a pool of blood, weeping, you stand outside the door. You kept your French alliance. You secured the capital to keep conquering. But from that moment on, something inside your soul completely dies. You finally realize that when you sit at the table of power, the very first thing you have to mortgage is your humanity. Backed by the French military, you launch a blitzkrieg across the Romagna region. But this isn't just a military game. It's a suffocating tightrope walk of finance and risk management. Your army, made up of French pikemen and Swiss mercenaries, burns through thousands of ducats every single day. It's a terrifying Ponzi scheme. You must constantly attack, constantly loot new cities just to make payroll. If your momentum stops for even one day, the mercenaries will mutiny and point their pikes at your heart. The immense psychological pressure keeps you awake night after night. You have to conquer the next city before the vault runs dry. You are a genius in warfare and a master of deception. You besiege cities, cut off water supplies, and pound walls with artillery. Rebellious lords are hanged without a second thought. In just 2 years, you carve out a massive territory. But conquering an empire is easy. Holding it is the nightmare. The Romagna has been ruled by chaotic, petty warlords for decades. Bandits roam free. It's anarchy. To establish order quickly, you make an incredibly dark strategic move. You appoint a ruthless general named Ramiro de Lorca as the governor of Romagna. Your order to him is simple: restore order by any means necessary. Ramiro is a brutal enforcer. He sets up gallows everywhere. He kills anyone who breaks the law, throwing commoners into dungeons for minor offences. The short-term result is spectacular. Within months, crime drops to zero and commerce booms. But the long-term impact is a ticking time bomb. The locals absolutely despise Ramiro, and you know that hatred will eventually shift to you, his boss. In modern business, this is the equivalent of a CEO hiring a cold-blooded HR director to execute mass layoffs and wage cuts. Once the company is profitable again, but the employees are ready to riot, the CEO needs a theatrical move to appease the mob. Your counter-strategy is a masterpiece of cruelty. A few days after Christmas, 1502. The citizens of Romagna wake up to a horrifying sight in the town plaza. Governor Ramiro has been sliced entirely in half. His body parts are displayed next to a blood-soaked wooden block and an executioner's axe. It was your order. You didn't just fire him, you made a gruesome public spectacle of him. The psychological effect is nuclear. The citizens are stunned. They no longer hate you. They actually praise you as a just prince who saved them from tyranny. Simultaneously, they are terrified of your methods. With the life of one subordinate, you cleared your own name and harvested absolute loyalty and fear. Machiavelli writes in his diary, utterly awestruck by your manipulation. But just as you think you have absolute control, a rebellion that could shatter your existence erupts from the inside. You were too successful. So successful that your own lieutenants are terrified of you. Several of your top mercenary commanders hold a secret meeting at the castle of Magione. They realize that once you unify central Italy, they will be the next ones purged. They decide to strike first. They mutiny. This is the biggest crisis of your life. Overnight, you lose 80% of your army. You are trapped inside the city of Imola, surrounded by your own rebel generals, while the massive armies of Venice and Florence wait further out, ready to finish you off. One wrong move, and your head will be on a spike by tomorrow morning. Your empire is collapsing. The pressure is crushing, but you don't panic. You display terrifying composure and strategic patience. You know the rebels have numbers, but they are divided and distrust each other. Your strategy: feign weakness, divide, and bait the trap. You start writing them letters, acting like a humbled loser. You promise to raise their pay. You even offer to give them the lands you conquered. You leak rumors stating you only want the title. The real power belongs to the generals. Think of a modern hostile takeover. You pretend to give up resisting and invite the hostile buyers right into your boardroom. Your disguise is flawless. The greedy generals buy it. They agree to a truce. To celebrate this renewed alliance, you invite the rebel leaders to a grand banquet in the coastal town of Senigallia. The atmosphere that day is unnervingly eerie. As you ride out to greet them at the city gates with a warm smile, your mind is calculating the exact seconds. You hug them warmly. You call them brothers. You guide them into the most heavily fortified palace in the city. The exact second the last general steps into the grand hall, your eyes change. Your loyal guards step back. The massive iron doors slam shut and lock behind the generals. There is no trial. There is no monologue. Assassins hiding in the shadows swarm the room. The rebel leaders, who were calling you brother just hours ago, are strangled with cords, gasping their last breaths in desperate struggles. That night shocked all of Europe. From a position of absolute disadvantage, using only psychological warfare and deceit, you eliminated all internal threats without fighting a single battle, instantly regaining 100% control of your army. Machiavelli hailed this as the absolute pinnacle of political art. You stand on the walls of Senigallia, watching the sunrise. You command a massive army. You are the terror of Italy. You believe you have conquered destiny itself, preparing to march on Tuscany next month to forge a unified Italian kingdom. But you made one fatal error. You calculated every single variable, except the most foundational one. Your empire has a fatal structural flaw. All your legitimacy, all your funding, the Vatican treasury, is tied to a single heartbeat: your father's. August 1503. The Roman summer is suffocatingly hot and mosquitoes are swarming. You and your father are invited to a dinner party at a suburban villa owned by Cardinal Cornetto. Rumour has it that this was meant to be an assassination, that you prepared poisoned wine to kill the wealthy host and seize his assets, but a servant mixed up the cups, and you drank your own poison. However, this remains unverified speculation. Another rumour has it that you both caught a lethal strain of malaria that was ravaging Rome. Whatever the cause, after that dinner, a catastrophic disaster strikes. You suddenly feel the room spin, extreme abdominal pain, and a spiking fever instantly crush you. Before you can even draw your sword, you collapse onto the marble floor. Almost simultaneously, your father collapses too. You are carried back to your Vatican bedroom. You roll in agony from the fever, violently vomiting bile mixed with blood. Days later, frantic bells ring outside your window. Every church in Rome is tolling. Your father is dead the moment you hear the news, even though you're too weak to sit up. Your brain goes into overdrive. You once bragged to Machiavelli, "I have a flawless contingency plan for every possible scenario when my father dies." But you realize in pure despair, you never calculated that when he died, you would be at death's door yourself. Your original plan, the second the Pope dies, you lead your elite army to surround the Vatican and force the cardinals at sword point to elect a puppet pope loyal to you. But now, you can't even stand. Your army is thrown into a panic because their commander is missing. On the brink of annihilation, you make one final manic decision. You drag yourself to the edge of the bed, call in your cold-blooded assassin, Micheletto, point to the door, and gasp out an order. "Go to my father's room. Take your blade. Take every coin, every jewel in the treasury. If they resist, kill them." Micheletto kicks down the Pope's door, holds a knife to the treasurer's throat, and loots 100,000 ducats of Vatican gold. You plan to use this massive fortune to bribe the cardinals and rig the upcoming papal election. But you're out of time. In modern business, this is like the founder dying unexpectedly. And while you're lying paralyzed in the ICU, you try to use the last bit of company cash to stop a hostile takeover by your worst enemy. It's impossible. The cardinals smell your weakness. The man they elect as the new pope is Julius II, the most hardcore, lifelong sworn enemy of the Borgia family. The very first thing the new pope does is liquidate you. Your gold is confiscated. Your army is disbanded or bribed away. The Romagna territory you built with endless blood, sweat, and betrayal crumbles in a matter of months, carved up by your rivals. You go from being the Grand Duke to a prisoner rotting in a Vatican dungeon. You are later extradited to Spain and locked in the ultra-secure La Mota castle. Do you accept defeat? No. On a stormy night, you tear your bedsheets into strips and rappel down the exterior wall of the massive tower. The rope is too short. You fall from a terrifying height, shattering your ribs and your arm. But you grit your teeth, crawl onto a waiting horse, and escape to the Kingdom of Navarre. You try to raise an army again, even just a small one. You want to march back to Italy. You want it all back. But your time is up. In 1507, during an insignificant skirmish over a meaningless town, you are surrounded by an enemy ambush. You don't beg for mercy. You swing your broken sword, fighting like a rabid beast until your body is pierced by dozens of pikes. You collapse into the cold, muddy wasteland. Your life freezes at the age of 31. When you die, you have no gold, no crown, and no one to weep for you. Your corpse is stripped naked and left in the dirt like garbage. Looking back at your short, explosive life, you were forced into a game of power that wasn't yours. To survive, you abandoned your conscience, taking deception, betrayal, and murder to their absolute limits. You won every single tactical gamble, only to be defeated by a tiny mosquito and an unpredictable fever. And that sister Lucrezia, the one you used as a pawn, the one history branded a venomous femme fatale. Because she was far away from the toxic core of your power, she stabilized her position in Ferrara. She washed away the stigma and became a highly respected duchess, living out the rest of her days in peace. As for you, you died in a wasteland, but your soul was forever trapped in the pages of Machiavelli's The Prince, turning you into the ultimate, immortal specimen of ruthless power. Today, when you face the betrayals and calculations of the corporate ladder or the modern rat race, when you face the temptation to cross a moral line just to climb one step higher, do you ever think back to that afternoon in the Pisa library when you were 17? If time could rewind, when those heavy oak doors crashed open, would you still choose to put on that blood-soaked crimson robe and become Cesare Borgia? Or would you jump out the window and run as far away as possible from the throne that turned you into a monster? The stakes on the table are always rising, and the abyss of power is always staring back. If it were you, what would you choose? Leave your decision in the comments below. If you were captivated by this ultimate gamble for power, hit that like button and subscribe. We'll see you next time at the next dangerous crossroads of history.